Councilmember Palmer, you're on mute. There you
Should
go.
I read all this all over again? I think I'll have to. Thanks, public. You're going to get actually 1.5 more minutes. Okay. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to preclude us from meeting safely in our council chambers. Can everybody hear me now? All right. We must therefore continue to operate in this virtual fashion using the public comment guidelines outlined by the Louisiana Attorney General. Here are the public comment rules that we will follow today. At the beginning of the meeting, staff will read the agenda for today's meeting in its entirety. That agenda is also online at council.nola.gov. We will then recess for 20 minutes to allow citizens to submit written comments for any agenda item. Anyone wishing to comment should go to council.nola.gov and fill out an online public comment form. Only written public comments will be accepted. Public comments will be limited to 1 comment per person per item. Comments should also be limited to 2 minutes when read aloud and be germane to the agenda item at hand. Public comment will be closed at the end of the 20-minute public comment period. No written comments will be accepted beyond that point. Before voting on any agenda item, council staff will read any public comment received for a pending agenda item. Okay, Mr. Carter, before you read the agenda in full, the other council members have come online. Could you go ahead and do another roll call, please?
Here.
He's
Present.
Here.
I know she said she was going to come on later. Excellent. And thank you all for joining me. I appreciate it. Okay, so with that, Mr. Carter, can you now read the agenda in full?
Agenda item 2, recess to receive public comment. Agenda item 3, approval of the minutes from the August 17, 2020. Agenda item 4, appointments. Audubon Commission, Vuxton, Jermaine Smith, Board of Building Standards and Appeals, John Robert Sawyer Jr., Damien Serauskas. Board of Zoning Adjustments, Rufo. City Planning Commission, Steeg. Edits Review Board, Colleen, Callia. Historic District Landmarks Commission, Jesse LeBlanc, Jason Robinson King, Jerome Smith, Justice System Advisory Committee, Damien Desdunes Senior, Robert Jones, Nakita Shavers, Byrne Sherwood, Dante Bidwell, Denise Chandler. New Orleans Library Board, Kathleen. Agenda item 5, ordinance calendar number 33,127, an ordinance to amend and reordain section 2-263 and to ordain section 2-264 of the Code of the City of New Orleans to update the composition of the New Orleans Children and Youth Planning Board to establish a subgroup therein entitled the Youth Advisory Board and otherwise to provide for subgroups. Agenda item 6, adjudications and STR enforcement, presentation by representatives of code enforcement and safety permits regarding restart of the adjudication process and updates of new STR enforcement efforts. Agenda item 7, update on listing development projects. Agenda item 8, other matters. Agenda item 9, adjournment.
Great, thank you. With that, we're going to adjourn for 20 minutes. We're going to recess, not adjourn. We're recessing for 20 minutes. We will come back in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Sure. So, appointments you're good with.
Okay, welcome back. Let's give a minute to have all of my cohorts back on line. Do I have my council members? 1, 2. Member Set is here, Councilmember Nguyen, Councilmember Jeruso, and I think Councilmember Moreno said she would join us about 1:30. So I think we can go ahead and get started. All right. So we did roll call. Is that correct, Mr. Carter? On to bigger and better things now, are we? All right. Number 2, are you ready? Number 3, we did the recess. Now we're on number 3, approval of the minutes from August 17th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So
Moved
moved.
and
Moved by Councilmember Brissette, seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. All right, next we're going to go straight into appointments. As we all know, Governmental Affairs is receives the questionnaires, and we go through the questionnaires that are all notarized, and then they come through the committee. All the committee members have the ability to review these appointments prior to the meeting, and now we're going to begin. We have quite a few today. So, Mr. Carter, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for the mayor's appointment of Jerome Vuxton as a member of the Audubon Commission.
Great. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso,
Second.
second by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay.
Research has received a questionnaire for the mayor's appointment of Jermaine Smith as a member of the Audubon Commission.
Do I have a motion?
Councilmember
moved.
Palmer, Madam Chair, it's very difficult to hear what is being spoken agenda item.
Oh, from Mr. Carter. Yes, it is difficult because he is on a different, different speaker. Can you speak
Okay,
loud?
speak up. Yeah, that would help if you could speak up.
I will, and just so you know, I'm gonna be saying the same thing for all these items, and it's just basically that council research has received a questionnaire from the environment to be approved.
And then you know what? And then I will read the names. How does that sound, council member, so that we can hear it better? Okay. So right now we are on which one?
Jermaine Smith.
We are on Jermaine Smith.
So moved.
Moved by, I'm sorry, who was that?
That was Councilmember Jeruso,
Moved by Councilmember
and
Jeruso,
I'll second it.
seconded by Councilmember Brissette. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And no nays.
And Madam Chair, I just wanted to say this is by request motion from the mayor's office for Jermaine Smith to the Audubon Commission for a term ending June 2026 and replacing Ms. Beth Lambert. Thank you.
Correct. That is correct. Okay, next we're going to go to Board of Building Standards and Appeals. Mr. Carter.
Council research has received a questionnaire for the mayor's reappointment of John Robert Sawyer Jr. as a member of the Board of Building Standards and Appeals.
So Mr. Carter said that it is in order, and this is for the mayor's reappointment of John Robert Sawyer Jr. as a Louisiana State Registered Architect, initial term ending June 30th, 2019, as a member of the Board of Building Standards and Appeal, effective upon approval of the City Council for a term ending on June 30th, 2024. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Brissette,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
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 No nays.
Council research has received a questionnaire for the mayor's reappointment of Damien Serauskas as a member of the Board of Building Standards and Appeals.
To repeat, Mr. Carter has found it to be in order for the mayor's reappointment of Damien Serauskas, whose initial term ends June 30th, 2020, as a member of the Board of Building Standards and Appeal, effective upon approval of the council for a term ending on June 30th, 2025. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso,
Second.
by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposition. Now we're going to C, which is Board of Zoning Adjustments.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for the mayor's appointment of Matthew Rufo as a member of the Board of Zoning Adjustments and Congress being over.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. So this is for the mayor's appointment of Matthew Rufo, Vice Deborah Harkins, initial term ending June 30th, 2020, as a member of the Board of Zoning Adjustments, effective upon our approval of the council for a term ending on June 30th, 2025. Do I
Move
have
for
a
approval.
Councilmember Smith moves for approval, seconded by Councilmember Jeruso. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition. Next is for City Planning Commission, D.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for the mayor's reappointment of Robert Steeg as a member of the City Planning Commission and Congress being over.
So Mr. Carter has found it to be in order for the mayor's reappointment of Robert Steeg, his initial term ending June 30th, 2020, as a member of the City Planning Commission, effective upon the approval of the Council of the City of New Orleans for a term ending on June 30th, 2029. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso, seconded by
Second.
Second.
Councilmember Brossette. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposition? No opposition. I would also like to thank Mr. Steeg for his already tenure at the City Planning Commission, which, as we all know, is longer than any of our terms. So thank you for your service. Next, Mr. Carter, Ethics Review Board.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for the mayor's appointment of Colleen Callia as a member of the Ethics Review Board and Congress being over.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. This is in regards to the mayor's appointment of Colleen Callia, Vice James Brown, initial term ending June 30th, 2019. This is the nominee of the University of New Orleans as a member of the New Orleans Ethics Review Board, effective upon approval of the Council of the City of New Orleans for a term ending on June 30th, 2026. Do I have, moved by Councilmember Brossette, seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposition. Thank you. Next is Historic District Landmarks Commission. Mr. Carter.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for the mayor's reappointment of Jesse E. LeBlanc II as a member of the Historic District Landmarks Commission, representing the Lower Park Historic District and the Congress being over.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. He stated that it all is in order for the mayor's reappointment of Jesse E. LeBlanc II, initial term ending June 30th, 2020, representing the Lower Garden Historic District as a member of the New Orleans Historic District Landmarks Commission, effective upon approval of the Council of the City of New Orleans for a term ending on June 30th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso, seconded by
Second.
Councilmember Brossette. All in favor?
Aye.
Yay.
Aye.
No opposition.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for Jason Robinson. Yeah, sorry, I got second. Council Research has received the questionnaire for the mayor's reappointment of Jason Robinson King as a member of the Historic District Landmarks Commission, representing Parkview Historic District.
Mr. Carter has found that Council Research has received, and it's all in order for the mayor's reappointment of Jason Robinson King, initial term ending June 30th, 2020, representing the Parkview Historic District as a member of the Historic District Landmarks Commission for a term ending on June 30th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso, seconded by
Second.
Councilmember Brossette. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposition. Next, we have appointments for Jerome Big Duck Smith, Justice System Advisory Committee. Mr. Carter.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for the appointment of Lynell Desdunes Senior as a member of the Jerome Big Duck Smith Justice System Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. This is for the appointment of Lynell Desdunes Senior, a nominee for the council member for District D, as a member of the Jerome Big Duck Smith Justice System Advisory Committee. for a term ending July 31st, 2021. Moved by,
Thank you. I move so moved for approval. Just to add that Mr. Desdunes works in the criminal justice field in the district attorney's office, working on expungements, and believe that his unique perspective and point of view will be a great asset to this committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
thank you. Moved by Councilmember Brossette, seconded by, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? No. Also, let us show that Council Vice President Juan Moreno has joined us. Thank you, Council Member. Next, Mr. Carter.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for the appointment of Robert Jones as a member of the Jerome Smith Justice System Advisory Committee.
Okay, this is for Mr. Robert Jones as a member of the Jerome Big Duck Smith Justice System Advisory Committee for a term ending on July 31st, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso, seconded
Second.
by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor, yay.
Yay.
No any opposition? No opposition. Mr. Carter.
Council Research has received the questionnaire for the appointment of Nakita Shavers as a member of the Jerome Big Duck Smith Justice System Advisory Committee.
Thank you. I will move on this. She's my appointment. She's a wonderful woman and founder of the Lynell Shavers Foundation, her brother was murdered, and really works very diligently to end violence in all capacity throughout our city. So I move. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? No. Next, please.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for the appointment of Dante Bidwell as a member of the Jerome Big Duck Smith Justice System Advisory Committee. We have appointed to him.
Okay.
This is fulfilling the spot.
Okay, this is for Dante Bidwell, serving as the appointee of the New Orleans Police Department as a member of the Jerome Big Duck Smith Justice Advisory Committee, effective for a term ending on July 31st, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Moreno, seconded by
Second.
Second.
Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
Yay.
Aye. Against, no opposition. I think we jumped over Byrne Sherwood, Mr. Carter.
I think so.
All right, Council Research has received the questionnaire for the appointment of Byrne Sherwood as a member of the Jerome Big Duck Smith Justice System Advisory Committee, and we have understand.
Thank you. This is from Mr. Carter. In terms of the appointment of Byrne Sherwood, serving as the appointment of the Health Department as a member of the Jerome Big Duck Smith Justice System Advisory Committee. Do I have a motion?
Move to approval.
Moved by Councilmember Brossette,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition. Next, we have, I think Denise Chandler. Now we're going up.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for the appointment of Denise Chandler as a member of the Jerome Big Duck Smith Justice System Advisory Committee, and we have understand.
Thank you. So this is for the appointment of Denise Chandler, serving as the appointee of the Office of Criminal Justice Coordination as a member of the Jerome Big Duck Smith Justice System Advisory Committee for a term ending on July 31st, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso,
Second.
second by Councilmember Moreno. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No opposition. Now moving to the New Orleans Public Library Board.
Council Research has received a questionnaire for the appointment of Kathleen Coverick as a member of the New Orleans Public Library Board, and we have understand.
Thank you. So this is for the mayor's appointment of Kathleen Coverick fulfilling the unexpired term of Lawrence Eustace III, which initial term was ending June 30th, 2023, as a member of the New Orleans Public Library, for a term now ending June 30th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso,
Second.
second by Councilmember Brissette. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? No. Before we go to item number 5 on the agenda, I think we have a public comment regarding the appointments. Andrew?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, this comment is by Justin Schmidt, not a paid representative. I am using the appointment of Matt Rufo to express concern over the events that took place at last week's council meeting when rules were suspended and various other appointees were approved by the council without the benefit of a committee hearing. While many of these appointments are ministerial, some like the BZA are significant given that the board sits as a quasi-judicial body, a court, and rules on matters involving the city. The fact that Tamara Agins, who I'm sure is a lovely person, was placed on the BZA without a committee hearing, given that she was employed by this mayor as recently as just over 2 years, is a problem given that this mayor and former mayors have ex parte communications with the board members. I would also comment that I would think that Councilmember Palmer could have found a District C constituent other than Megan Kiefer to serve on the Fairgrounds Citizen Advisory Board. Ms. Kiefer lives over 2 miles away from the fairgrounds by way the crow flies and is not impacted by its operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Just as a refresher for everybody, unfortunately, we were supposed to have a governmental affairs, but we had a little hurricane scare last week, and we had all those committee appointments were first vetted through and made available to the council members prior to the city council meeting, which was unfortunate. I wish we did not have to do it, but we did. And I will take note of Ms. Megan Kiefer being the District C appointment. It is absolutely good. She is an attorney. Not only that, I did bring her appointment through a couple of the people that live in Faubourg St. John neighborhood to make sure that they liked this appointment, which they did, and they approved, thinking that she would add a level of professionalism to the board as she is an attorney. And for those of you who may not remember, the reason District C has an appointment on the Fairgrounds Committee is that District C encompassed the fairgrounds up until 2010 when we had reapportionment. But they still are adjoining, and I think it is very appropriate to have a powerful neighborhood voice on that committee. So thank you very much, Mr. Schmidt, for your public comment. Next, we are going to item number, I'll let you go that, Mr. Carter. Number 5. We're back on the agenda. Mhm.
Seven ordinance amended ordain sections 2-3, ordain section 2-264, code of the city of Lawrence. Updated section 4 to establish something therein.
Great, thank you very much. This updates, council members, this updates the membership of the New Orleans Children and Youth Planning Board, CYPB. Karen Evans, the CYPB's executive director, is here, so I'm going to turn it over to her for some initial remarks. However, first I'd like to give a brief overview of this ordinance, which comes to us at the request of CYPB. The first aspect is a change to 2 of the positions on the board. We are removing the Recovery School District Superintendent, as this position no longer exists, and the CYPB already includes the Orleans Parish School Superintendent. Instead, the director of the city's Office of Youth and Families, currently Emily Wolf, will be included. I know she has already been very actively participating in CYPB over the course of, and it's relevant to CYPB's work. I just also want to thank Emily for going to all of these meetings and being such an integral part of them. We are also removing a position dedicated to a representative of a local nonprofit organization providing services to children, unquote, in the area of school retention, since several other positions on the CYPB adequately cover this. The executive director of the New Orleans Public Library will take this position, which I think is very exciting. Both of these changes are consistent with state law, and they make sense for the work CYPB is doing. The second aspect of the ordinance is codifying a youth advisory board, something Karen has been cultivating with the CYPB with great success. This is a really vital way to add more youth voices to the conversations. In addition with that, Karen, I'm going to turn this over to you. And I just really appreciate you being here and for your collaboration and your leadership on this ordinance. So Karen, Ms. Evans, are you there? I saw you earlier.
I am here. It says it cannot start the video without the host making it happen.
Where's our host?
Here you go.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
There we are. Hello, Ms. Evans. How are you?
Hello, I'm well.
Good to
How are you
see
all?
Good to see you.
It's great to be here with you, particularly under these circumstances. We are so excited about the adjustments and the updates. And so for that, we say, first of all, thank you. Thank you for your support. And thank you for hearing our vision to expand the really reflection of what the landscape means for the children and youth of the communities in New Orleans. It includes the Office of Youth and Families efforts. They have been active and present, and it includes what our libraries are doing, sometimes in support and partnership with, and sometimes singularly, to help assist and develop our young people in this community to advance on success paths. And so that's what this is. In addition, we believe that there is nothing about what the Children and Youth Planning Board is to do that should not include the voice of young people. And so the creation and codifying of the Youth Advisory Board is essential. It should not be held to whoever is in leadership. It should be part of the design. And we believe this is a move to make that happen. Grateful for the opportunity to do that with y'all's leadership and your approvals. So I will stop there because there is a video that I'd like for y'all to see that really shows the voice and the direction that we're looking to take the young people in this city.
Let me turn it up some.
We come up with creative solutions. It's not all bad and awkward. Story of the woman must reflect our contribution and leadership. Our story must be about us and by us. Recognizing that each generation has its movements that are advanced by youth leaders. Today, our generation sets the stage for the next one to come. Socially conscious, intelligent, just, and equitable.
Well, wish you could have heard it, but I will forward you the link so that you can go see what we're doing with the Youth Master Plan in partnership with the New Orleans Youth Alliance and the Office of Youth and Families. We are moving forward with the Youth Master Plan envisioned with an aspirational direction provided by our young people. And that was the video that described what their vision was for the city and for their peers, those who follow them and those who precede them. So with that, I again, thank you for your support, appreciate your making room for these adjustments, and look forward to your hopeful approval.
Thank you, Karen. We unfortunately, we weren't able to, if you would send us the link, I'll make sure that all the members get it, and we'll make it also part of the public record and see if we can't link it onto our website.
Perfect,
It looks wonderful. I want to hear the words to it. Council members, does anyone have any questions or comments for Karen? No? Well, again, Karen, thank you so much. We're going to, I'll take a motion. I'll actually move to forward this to the full council for a vote. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Second by Councilman Russo. All in favor? Aye.
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 No opposition. So thank you so much, Karen. So this will go to the full council to vote.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate you all.
Maybe, you know what, maybe what we can do is if we can figure it out before the full council, when the agenda item comes up, we'll show the video at the full council.
That
So
would
let's
be
get the
great.
link to Paul, our chief, and then we'll
Okay.
he's got it, and then we'll make sure that we put it part of the council meeting. How's that? Good, good. Thank you again so much for your work. It's a really exciting time for the youth. Excellent. All right, Mr. Carter.
Next agenda item is agenda item 6, communication with state enforcement, presentation by representatives of code enforcement, safety and fairness, regarding the communication process with its
Great, thank you so much. This is, I know everybody, I've been hearing lots of comments and questions in the community and also on the council from fellow council members about code enforcement and the issues surrounding STRs. Oh, and look, our friend Councilmember Banks has joined us. Hello, Councilmember Banks. Got a few STRs in your district, don't you?
That's why I'm here.
All right, so we're gonna turn this over. Is Tammy Jackson with us, Ms. Jackson? I know we have a presentation from the administration. There you are.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ms. Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having us,
I'm going to
and
turn it
giving us
over to you for your presentation.
Okay. Thanks again. Thanks for having us and giving us an opportunity to explain exactly what we've been doing. To the extent that both departments, code enforcement and the Department of Safety and Permits, are responsible for enforcement and citation against properties in violation, we have combined efforts. We will be using the term code adjudication as to not be confused with tax adjudication. And so we think this will create consistency in enforcement as well as ensuring that we are operating efficiently and we're not redundant in our efforts. So you're familiar with code enforcement and safety and permits, and we both have hearings. Ultimately result in a judgment, which is the term adjudication. And like I said, you will be hearing the term code adjudication because we do not want to confuse anyone with tax adjudicated status. And so this is where safety and permits and code enforcement intersect. And so that's why we're combining our efforts. Next slide. Again, this is the code enforcement process from beginning to end. We still use 311. We also have code enforcement at NOLA.gov, which I know all of you are very familiar with. So the entire team can get the complaint and we can respond to your complaint timely. Inspection in both of our processes, research, notice, and of course, compliance. That is our happy face, or we may have a judgment and the result of the judgment, the abatement tools are sheriff sale, demolition, or lot abatement, and one property can have all three.
Tammy, I have a quick question on the little pathway, I guess, from 311 on. Who does the research?
We have 8 full-time researchers now. Some are working in the office and some are working at home. And research, as you know, is really the slowest part of our process, because what we do is a 30-year abstract to result in if we're going to sell this property. We do have shortcuts for individuals that are really savvy at research. And so the 30-year process, it doesn't take 30 years, but we do have over 5,000 in the research queue.
So I have regarding again the research. What is the background of the researchers to do this? How
They
are
are
they trained?
They are trained in this. They're trained in the office.
They're
However,
trained in the
many
office?
have- pardon?
I'm sorry, they're trained in-house by employees at City Hall, you said?
Yes, attorneys.
By attorneys. And
Specifically,
they have access to all sorts of data banks.
yes. The research, we start with the assessor's office, but that's where we start, and then we go to land records, conveyance, notarial archives, civil district court records are reviewed, as well as we have CLEAR, which is a Westlaw people finder tool. So in addition to simply mailing to the address of record with the assessor, we also find alternate addresses. For code enforcement and blight judgments, that is particularly important because many of the properties still have the property address, the property in violation address as the mailing address. So CLEAR is, the people finder is very important tool to have, so we can actually find alternate addresses. Prior to
So is it then
2009,
corrected on the assessor's website?
we cannot correct the owner of the property has to file something with the assessor in order to change the address.
But like, say you're on the assessor's website and there's a vacant lot that is in your neighborhood and it's overgrown and you want to find out who owns it, right? And they've contacted your office, and when you go onto the assessor's site, it shows that the tax bill goes to the vacant lot, right?
Yes.
So then your researchers have to dig a little bit deeper to find out where the property owner really is. Does your researcher then contact, after you find out, whichever way it is, where the property owner lives? Do you then call the assessor's office to change it?
No, we do not. However, that information is in Llama, and the assessor can have access to that information as well as Treasury when the tax bills are mailed out. However, they say they cannot change that the owner.
Well, that's a
of the record.
problem. That's a huge problem, and that's not right. So,
But the information is available to the assessor as well as the Treasury.
we have to change
But we
that to
can-
Treasury?
No, the assessor is responsible for the mailing address, and they will not change it unless the owner requests that change.
But that's stupid because the owner's hiding. Because I can't tell you how many vacant lots I pull up, and it looks like the property tax bill is going to the vacant lot.
And I understand the process because think about it, anyone can go and change anyone's address at any time.
Right, but there's got to be, if you, or if the city is giving another city agency, the assessor, the correct information, and then they refuse to change it, isn't that a problem?
It's not a refusal because like I said, we do not send them anything to say, oh, we actually found where this person was. But at the same time, their process requires the owner by affidavit to change that address. No one can just simply change the address without some corroborating information. And as you can imagine, if I have a Joe Smith, when we're looking for blighted properties and people that want to hide, particularly with common names, I have to make sure I have the right Joe Smith instead of sending the information to the assessor. And that may not be the Joe Smith that is at this new address that I have. And
Okay,
also,
are the researchers lawyers, these 8 people?
no, the researchers are not lawyers.
Okay. I'm sorry, continue. I'm getting sidetracked but we're going to figure this one out because that's important.
Okay. The information is available. We're always available to help and share information. Like I said, it is available if the assessor wants it, as well as Treasury.
Okay. I'm sorry, go on.
Okay. Next slide. So we've gone through the process from beginning to end. And this is the process with safety and permit violation, with building violations. You can report a complaint as well. There's an inspection, research, and noticing. And with most of the complaints started in safety and permits, the research will be a little easier because it is based on a permit. So they've willingly given us their information because they needed something from us. So it wouldn't take as long. And we're not looking for heirs of property where there's been years of neglect and no one's done a succession in code enforcement. So this research should be a little easier because not only do we have the address for the assessor, but we generally also have some application that they've made, a permit application that they've made. have the hearing, and the result of the hearing is hopefully corrective action, a judgment, and or fine.
Can I ask a question here? Tammy, I think you may know where I'm headed on this one. At the hearing, if the judgment comes out against the person who's being have a complaint, are they being served at that time with notice of a daily fines hearing? Because I think the process has been judgment, then 30 days for an appellate process, then the daily fines, and that gives a really long amount of time for people to be in non-compliance.
Okay. So at the initial hearing, when the judgment is rendered, yes, they are given notice that there could be daily fines. So it's a potential for daily fines. And this was litigated in civil district court where they said, when it's not a final judgment, you must have another hearing. So that potential for daily fines, you can't simply say you're going to have 30 days of daily fines the next 30 days. You actually have to come back after the 30-day period or a 60-day period and then ask the hearing officer for a final judgment, and those fees have to be calculated. So at the first hearing, you can't give them 30 days of daily fines in the future and not have another hearing to calculate whether or not their appeal period has elapsed and whether or not they have taken corrective action during that appeal period and abatement period.
Yeah, that's
So
not quite my question. My question is, there's a judgment rendered or at that day, why not just serve the complainant that day with a hearing that is 31 days out or 61 days out, so that way we've truncated the amount of time, because I think what's happening is judgment, appeal time, which is not suspensive, by the way, it's devolutive, and there's no bond being posted. And then
it can be suspensive.
Okay, but is
and
that
they
happening
can file bond,
frequently?
and that is given that day. So if the judgment is given that day, the bond is also given that day. So it can be a suspensive appeal.
Okay. But at the same time, as long as they're there, why not just serve them and get the next hearing on the books rather than wait? It seems like we're giving people so many multiple bites of the apple. You give them the abatement, which they're supposed to do. They don't do the abatement. They're supposed to come to court. You come to court, you get a judgment rendered against you. You have an appeal period where everybody should be able to exercise their appeal rights. I don't disagree with that. But for those people who are bad actors that we see repeatedly, they know it's going to be 9 months, a year before something happens. So why not try and truncate that process?
And we have prioritized where it isn't 9 months on some cases. And prior to the cyber attack, we actually were going to do a test case of given dates that were approximately 60 days ahead. And we just never got to do that test case. So that is something we will get back to. We're just trying to get back to normal now. And so,
Right.
But that was something we were putting in there. And because that requires generating the notices for that day, to also say in addition, the judgment to also say in addition to these fines, your appeal period and corrective action being 30 days, we're going to see you in 60 days to determine whether or not you have, like I said, we were, prior to the cyber attack, we were working on a test case. You know, I told you it was the G rule, but we never got to that point.
Okay, well, now that we're almost a year past the cyber attack, do we think at some point this year we'll be able to do the trial case, or first quarter of 2021?
Even though we're a year past, something else interrupted us getting back to normal. So really March is when we had access to llama. And then March is also when we suspended a lot of action due to COVID. So the hearings resumed in code enforcement July 28th. And so during the hearing process right now, we were able to schedule in between 40 to 50 hearings on a day. And we generally did that twice a week. Right now, we're only able to schedule about 10 the way we're set up to ensure that we have proper social distancing and we won't have many people waiting in the waiting room, because we have options of the owners can attend. or they can call or video conference. So to keep that process going and making sure that not only is the staff safe, but the owners of these properties are safe, we can only do 10 or less a day. So we're trying to put other systems in place. Like I said, we're really trying to get back to normal where we can actually have some enforcement on a regular basis. And so, no, we didn't implement any new processes in that.
Okay, well, I guess I know all of us are impeded by COVID and the cyber attack, but there is going to come a point where we can't keep on saying that's impeding progress. And so I just would like to see at some point, we're now sort of 6 months past that point where we're starting to say, all right, let's try in January, for example, that we're gonna do our test case and give a date 61 days out. Let's see how it goes.
I got it.
Thank you.
All right. Next slide. And in getting ready for this process, we also had some training initiatives, making sure that the staff was ready to do this, because this is very different in how we're operating with technology, as well as, ensuring that first and foremost, everyone is safe. And then also first, 1.5, that, due process, that there is notice timely and the opportunity to be heard. And that opportunity to be heard will be in person, video conference, and by call. And so training staff as well as hearing officers to ensure that we are fulfilling all of our legal obligations. Okay. The next slide is a photo of the notice of hearing. And with the notice of hearing, as you can see, we do, cite the COVID crisis, and then we give them the 3 ways they can attend in person, and we let them know that it is the owner. This also is on the website. Teleconference, and we are using WebEx. And so the access code and the call-in number is given. But for the video conference, the link is found on the calendar of hearings on the code enforcement site. That's on the next slide. And so here you can join directly from this site. The WebEx link is there, as well as more information about if you have some information about a hearing. During the hearing, we're asking that constituents email any of their concerns, and we will make it a part of the record. Prior to the hearing, we ask that they just make the subject line hearing and put the address. And as soon as we get that information, we make that part of the case file, and we'll introduce that into evidence. Next slide. And of course, the part you've all been waiting for, our enhanced short-term rental enforcement. The internal controls are, we have an alliance with an OPD. We're always working closely together with them, especially during this crisis, as well as, code enforcement is going out to make sure that if there is a violation, we're in conjunction with NOPD, getting together to make sure that we have increased night and weekend inspections, because if we get a complaint on a Saturday and we go out Monday, of course, the result is no violation. So we're making sure to inspect during those peak days and times so that we can actually have a collection of evidence that is consistent with, going to court to prove the allegations or the violations against the owner of the property. Also,
hang on, Ms. Jackson, I have a question about that, if you don't mind, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So on I appreciate the fact that, that there's going to be, or that there are now inspections at night and on the weekends, because that's something that we've really been pushing on, and something that we've certainly heard from constituents about. So tell me about how robust is this? I mean, do you have somebody or a few people allocated every single night to be able to go out at midnight or 2 in the morning when there's could be a huge party at an STR or whatever. How many people are we talking about here? And is it every night and every weekend night in particular?
No, currently it is only Friday and Saturday nights, and it is at least one person that is going out in conjunction with code enforcement inspectors. Currently, that is where we are now. We are looking to ramp that up as we see an increase in complaints. And right now, the complaints that we've had come in, we've been able to inspect those regularly on the weekend inspections.
How many do you get as far as complaints on the weekends at night?
Oh, I do not know the number, and I know Ashley Backnell, Celeste Sparks are on. If they can answer that, I would appreciate it as far as the complaints.
Councilmember Moreno, this is Ashley Backnell. I don't have that number at my fingertips, but I am happy to find it for you.
Yeah, that would be great, because I'm just trying to, I'm wanting to understand just how many are we able to meet all those demands. What is the current demand right now? How many complaints are we getting on the weekends? So
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great.
There's a couple of different sources that information comes from, which is why I don't have a concrete number for you. One is our short-term rental email address, which is str@nola.gov, which is checked on a daily basis, constantly throughout the day. There's also a link on our website where you can report STR complaints and violations. And people have been calling 311, so we have access to those 311 complaints also. The other thing I should mention is that the platforms, Airbnb specifically, has rolled out a new function where neighbors can report activity directly to the platforms as well as to us. And the platforms will take their own action, which could include delisting or other forms of internal enforcement for them.
Gotcha. All right, thank you, Ashley.
And can I ask a question along those regards to, we discussed this last week, so I think public discussion of this would be helpful. There are operators who are on, whether it's Airbnb, VRBO, whatever platform, who are listing licenses that are wrong. They list the wrong license number. So if you go on to the STR viewer, you can see the license number has expired, doesn't exist, was revoked, whatever the case may be. And yet they're on a platform advertising themselves not only as an STR, but as a viable one because of the license. So I guess two things. Number one is, will there be functionality on the outward facing STR to see if a license matches an address, so that way people can compare apples to apples? And then two, I just want to make sure if that gets reported, that the delisting effort is being facilitated as quickly as possible. I know COVID has played a response. I know the cyber attack has. I know the platforms have to do their part. But I also want to make sure if somebody reports it on Monday and the evidence lines up on Tuesday that they're not licensed, that within just a couple of days it's being delisted, or within a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, so we have a regular schedule to report delistings. This is sort of a process we've just started with the platforms. So we're training our staff right now. We've successfully delisted over 50 illegal listings so far. The way that process would work is you can search on the One Stop app by license number or by address. The One Stop app is the same records that we can see internally. So it will show you what the correct license number is, whether that license is valid. And the one thing it won't show is if there's a pending application. Those are not released until they're completed. But what we can do from that is we've seen that too with properties that list their STR licenses, 19 STR 0000. Those are immediately on our list to the platforms to be delisted.
How quickly does it take to get those delisted?
We had, with both of the platforms, we're able to pull all the listings we requested down within a week. Airbnb is rolling out a new tool for us that we think will move that even more quickly. And I know I spoke with Expedia yesterday, and they're working on some tech solutions to help smooth out their process as well, but they've been very cooperative.
And aside from like a wrong license number, how many complaints does it take to get a property delisted or the owner's permit removed?
So there's sort of two different tracks there. Delisting is really about what you've posted as your listing somehow violates the law on its face. And that is something we can just request to be taken down under the platform's platform permit. For quality of life complaints, those tend to be something that we need to take to adjudication so that then we can take action on the license and revoke or suspend the license, however the hearing officer would decide the case. And from there, if they continue to list, we could request delisting. But delisting is really about the listing you see on the platform, not so much about the property itself.
Councilmember Banks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not a member of this committee, but I would appreciate you all indulging me with just a few minutes and a couple of questions, because I'm really not clear. When someone applies for an STR permit, are they automatically issued a temporary permit?
No, they're not. During the cyber attack, they were given a number while we processed permits, but in general, that's not common practice, and we are no longer doing that.
Well, and I raised that issue because there was a permit just recently issued for an STR in the Garden District, and they're prohibited from having STRs. I'm just curious how that happened.
I'm not sure, but I'm happy to look into that one.
Okay, all righty. And let me go back to problems. I get delisting, but other than delisting, what other punitive actions can be taken against a property or a property owner? Because delisting in and of itself may sound like what it is, but if I've already connected with 50 clients, I don't have to be on the platform. They got my cell, I got their cell. We don't even have to pay the Airbnb fee. We can just connect up directly and still do the same thing. So other than delisting, what other punitive actions are there?
Well, now, and make sure when they're delisting also that that it is canceled. Whatever they booked, that booking is canceled also. And so you're talking about if they go on their own and they're not on a platform?
Correct.
That would be adjudication. That's where we would take that, because then that would be a zoning violation. They're, operating outside of that because they're not listed. And so that would mean we would have to go to adjudication with that.
And then how many times do you go to adjudication?
Well, as many times as it takes, but at the same time, also there are other actions after adjudication when the person has, failed to take corrective action or stop the illegal activity. And so we will move forward.
I've got some addresses, 3900 Byrne. There was a shooting there. They operate without a permit. It's been sent to safety and permits multiple times, and I'm told that it's being worked on. 515 General Taylor, 515 First Street, 808 Byrne, 320 North Cortez. All of these addresses have been reported. There have been sites of very large parties, large gatherings that fall out into the street, and it's bad enough before COVID. But now that you got COVID, it's multiplying a bad situation and making it worse. So how many times does somebody get brought to adjudication before they actually get something that will make them stop?
And I think Councilman Banks too, tell me if I'm wrong, is like we also discussed at what point do you pull the meter on the property?
The light meter, the water meter, something.
Right, and adjudications resume on these types of properties October 21st. It's Wednesday, October.
So wait, so there have been no adjudications for how long?
Since the cyber attack. Like I said, code enforcement resumed hearings July 28th.
Wow.
Okay, so all right, so now we're back on since July 3rd, right? Since July 3rd, what else can we do now for these bad players what does it take to just pull the electrical meter? What do we have to do?
We go to adjudication, and that's, they resume October 21st.
So those neighbors that have to live with these problems and have been living with them since the cyber attack, there is no recourse until October 21st. Now, I'm going to concede that. So on October 21st, we bring them all to adjudication and they're found guilty of all of these things that we've said that they've been involved in. What's the next step? How long does it take to actually get somebody shut down?
And at that time, we can ask the hearing officer also if the electric can be pulled.
And again, Tammy, I appreciate that. I'm not trying to beat you up. I'm just trying to understand. That's October 21st. We
Yes,
get there, they're guilty. The hearing officer says you can pull the electrical meter. Is that happen that day? Is it a month after that? How does it work?
No, sir. And at all times with every court proceeding, you have an appeal period, right? And so and time to make that corrective action. And so we say, if you do not follow the judgment, then we can proceed with the next step. But at all time, even neglectful owners have due process rights. And so there is an appeal period.
Well, they've had due process rights for the past 6 months. I mean,
I understand, but we have to go to the hearing first, right?
What?
Tammy, what I'm trying to get to is, and again, I'm not beating you up. I'm just trying to understand. How big is the window? Okay, you come to get adjudicated on October 21st. You're found guilty. You got an appeal period. How many times do you get to be found guilty before we can actually do something? Do you get two guilty verdicts? Is it 10 guilty verdicts? Do you appeal forever and there's never any punishment? I'm just trying to get a clear understanding of what happens.
And that's why we get to the point where there is punishment, there is a judgment, and or, the meter has been pulled, and then we keep going further if another case needs to be brought. But as you know, I can't, as far as bad actors go and trying to see how do we stop the action, we just have to do it legally. And
Kenny,
so
I promise you, I don't want you to do anything illegal. I'm just trying to understand the
we have to
legal
go
process.
the legal route, and we just have to dot all our I's and cross all our T's. And that's why I'm talking about progressive collection of evidence to make sure we have the right evidence, so there are no technicalities where it creates a longer process as well. So we do everything right, the first time, so that we can get to a place where we have shown the hearing officer that this is a bad actor and this is why these things need to be done. But we're going to have, as frustrating as it is, we're going to have to do it each time and do it each time right until it's too expensive for that person. And I'm talking about fines, fees, pulling meters, whatever it takes. But at the same time, we have to do everything right. Even though that's a bad actor, we can't act like them and just go pull and ask for the lawsuit after. We have to do everything right, go in the right route, and then go from there.
And then my final question is, if you've got a property that has multiple violations and we go to the adjudication on October 21st, is that hearing counted as, even though they've just hypothetically, they got 5 violations, they go that one day, is that one day that they get credit with a bad act? Or do you count each one of those bad acts individually and now they've got 5 that were adjudicated on the same day? How does that work?
It is one day. It's the evidence that we have in front of us. So if there is one violation, but it occurred 5 times, it is the one violation.
Oh, no. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
See, that gives the bad actors way too much leverage and leeway to continue to do the same thing over and over. So if I can't get you to court, but every 10 times, and you get a whole lot of bias because you're only counted once for each of those other 9. Is there any way that we can have a way that each of those violations stands on its own?
Per
and
day,
then we deal with it that way?
Yes, sir. Per day, yes, sir. Could be each violation per day. Yes, sir. That's a different question. But if we had a case and we brought it to hearing, so we have a violation and we go to hearing on the violation that occurred on September 24th. The hearing date is October 21st. if there are violations that occur in between September 24th and the 21st, I have not noticed you about those violations. They had not occurred yet. So I noticed you about the September 24th violation. That's what I'm saying. But of course, if I send out something on September 24th and I have evidence from September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, that is each offense, each day. That is different. And that, so hopefully I answered the question to make sure you understand what I was saying. When I send out the notice, that's where the violation is. I'm sending you a notice for the violation that occurred. If something happens between September 24th and the day of the hearing, I cannot fine you for that because I didn't notice you for that. But if I send out the hearing notice and it has 10 days and evidence of 10 days of violations, certainly each offense can be fined.
And our notice is going out now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so theoretically, somebody could show up on October 21st and then have 4 different instances they've got to be heard on.
Yes, sir.
Theoretically,
Prior to this date, yes, sir.
Okay, okay, thank you.
And so those are 5 different offenses.
It can be. We have to cite them and notice them for the 5 separate offenses. On September 1st, this occurred, this was witnessed. On September 3rd, this occurred, this was witnessed.
Okay, so basically, so what I think Councilmember Banks is saying, if there are 5 different sightings and you can pass a judgment on 5 different sightings, and would that be enough to pull the meter? So it'd be 5 different judgments.
It's ultimately the hearing officers. Remember, the hearing officer makes that determination.
Okay, so it sounds like Councilmember Banks, you and I are going to go to the hearing on October 21st, and we're going to sit there and we're just going to watch the proceedings and see what they come up with. I'm game if you're game.
Councilmember Palmer, why don't you and Councilmember Banks, and I'd love to join y'all, why don't we do an ordinance saying if you have a certain number of complaints, let's say, I don't know, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5, I don't know, that then we pull the meter.
Yeah, I'm all about streamlining the process.
I mean,
and Council Vice President, I think that's a wonderful idea. We need to set the parameters that make it far more difficult for the bad actors to continue to do the same thing. So no, that's an excellent idea. And let's do that because we've got these multiple violators and there's no penalty. You just keep going around and around. So let's do it. If you get 3, your meter's gone, and then see how you have your hot party in the heat.
And I just worry about, kind of the notion that, hey, eventually if we find them enough or whatever, they're going to become good actors. There are some folks that these fines mean nothing to them. And so they're just they're going to be making a lot more money throwing these parties than actually paying these fines. So they don't care.
Or they don't live here. Why should they care?
But what they do care about is when they can no longer utilize that property. And that's when you pull the meter, to your point, Councilmember Banks and Councilmember Palmer as well. Ms. Jackson, I have a question. How many properties are up for adjudication now, and how many of these properties are dealing with multiple notices?
I do not have the docket in front of me. But as I stated before, we cannot have as many as we usually have because of social distancing and making sure that our people are safe.
I get that, but I think I would really like to see what properties are out there that are going to be facing adjudication and how many of these particular properties are facing several offenses or notices. I'd love to see that list.
I think that's an excellent question. Ms. Jackson, could you get that information and send it to all the council offices, please?
As soon as we're publishing the docket, I'll make sure you have it.
I have some follow-up too. So I think Ms. Jackson, to Councilmember Banks's point, this place in the Garden District that didn't have the license that was supposed to, let's suppose it's within the restricted area. Is there not a per se violation that is just automatically a violation and corrective action can be taken immediately? I mean, in other words, I know people have due process rights, but that's also for somebody who hasn't committed sort of a major offense. Is there anything that can be done to sped that up? Number one, let's start there.
I will have to get back to you on that to see
Okay.
if there's emergency procedures for a zoning violation.
Yeah, because it seems to me like if it's prohibited, like the French Quarter, or I see Councilmember Palmer shaking her head, or the Garden District, or you don't have a license, then there
Then it
ought
should be
to
like
be
automatic revocation.
correct, exactly, and then you can go, and then two,
But
and
if you don't have a license, what are we revoking?
well,
You're
I mean,
revoking the fact that they're acting illegally on
Yeah.
at the building. They're not supposed to be having any STR. They're not supposed to rent anything out.
they shouldn't be doing it at all.
And then
Right, and that's
to
what
go
I'm saying,
along with what
revocation
Councilmember
is for someone that has a license that does something improperly, and that's, revocation. And you're saying that these people do not have a license. And what action can we take when they do not have a license, right?
I think we're saying you automatically take their meter
Okay.
and shut them down. Similar
Shut
to,
it down.
do you mind, Councilmember Jeruso? I have one
Yeah,
addition to
yeah.
that. So like Councilmember Banks is having these big parties at STRs. That is in direct conflict with the mayor's orders in terms of her emergency orders, right? So isn't that grounds for automatic revocation and just taking the meter if it's an unsafe situation? Because if we're still underneath the mayor's executive orders, I would think that we could automatically pull a meter if there are, say, 20 guests hanging out in a room.
That is something we can explore.
Okay.
And then,
I'm sorry,
Tammy, I have
Councilman
yeah, it's all right. I have like a lawyer question now. Has there been any effort to enter into consent judgments with all of the people who are on the docket for October 21 to try and make this go a lot faster? And then as part of that consent judgment, they'll agree to waive their appellate deadlines. Let's get this moving. So we're going to have to wait more than a month now. If we can get people to sign on the dotted line right now, I agree to, this is the violation, this is how I'm remediating it, I'm waiving my appellate deadline, et cetera, then it may make this go a whole lot faster and not have to wait till October 21st or facilitate it.
We definitely are open to conversations, and we've had those with some of the people, but it's specifically for the docket on October 21st, I cannot say.
Yeah, I'm just, I would encourage, because it sounds like there's a backlog, and expediency is important to all of us, as you can hear from the questions that are coming from at-large member districts A, B, and C, where these issues predominate, that if there's an effort to try and get people essentially to settle early and on favorable terms, the city, and therefore make the hearing process go faster, I think that's worthwhile. And then if people aren't bad actors, then they should be willing to waive their appellate rights, right? I mean, if it's, I made a minor mistake, I mean, no, seriously. I mean, if you're playing by the rules, then what is there to appeal? Just saying it may be a device.
And that's why I said I can confirm that we are definitely open to speaking with people that there may be violations against, and if they are able to forfeit or concede some of the violations, including fines, we are definitely open to making sure that that doesn't have to go to adjudications, but for the ones that do, we will, get there. So I can tell you there are conversations so that we can get through the backlog.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Palmer.
No, thank you. I have a few questions as well. Do you have something else? We'll keep going. All right. When many of our constituents ask what happens when they submit a complaint to the STR office, can you explain your process?
Once the complaint is submitted, then we send out an inspector, and generally based on the complaint, like I said, that's why we've increased night and weekend inspections. There's an inspection, and then we create our list to proceed to adjudication.
Okay, so
there are re-inspections as well.
So the inspections and the re-inspections have been occurring throughout these 6 months, even though you've not been having adjudication.
That's correct. And monitoring the location, because if we go the first time, we know like I said, if somebody called on a Friday and we went on a Monday, or a Saturday and we went on a Monday, we know we're not going to find a violation. So we make sure to put that on the next weekend's rotation to monitor that property.
Okay, so we can anticipate on October 21st, is that some of these properties that are going to adjudication will have multiple infractions because you've sent out so many inspectors along the way.
I do not have the docket in front of me, so I cannot tell you what is on the docket for October 21st.
I think that kind of speaks again to Councilman Moreno's question in terms of numbers of properties and also numbers of complaints. If we could have that, I think that would be helpful. And then can you speak to the most common compliance issues that you're seeing, especially under the new laws?
It has been, and we have prioritized house parties, especially during COVID. I would say that's the majority of the complaints currently, with multiple people are hanging out around the property. So there is a house party going on.
Okay, so house parties, and that's what we're hearing as well. So I feel like that is something that we should be able to have some type of immediate pulling of a meter on. I think we need to look at that pretty quickly here and see what type of powers we have under the mayor's executive power. But similarly, I feel that if bars are flouting like what we saw at Tracy's, if they are flouting the mayor's orders and they immediately get shut down, I don't see any difference to if you have an illegally operating STR that's having a house party, or even a house party that goes against the numbers that are allowed to congregate. That should also be immediately shut down. And I feel like the only way to really do that is through pulling the meter. When you receive a complaint, and for a complaint to be most effective, what kind of information do you need besides the address?
To be honest, that's what we need, because we have to do our own investigation. So the complainant can send video, which they have sent video previously. But to be honest, we do have to do our own investigation.
Okay. I like the idea of sending video and is there a way to upload videos? Yes, they're uploading the videos.
They are sending them by email, and we are getting them in different avenues. Of course, with the cyber attack, we have increased security, so sometimes that is a little, difficult. But
I would think videos would be helpful for you when they go to adjudication. I would think that would be something that we would want people to do.
They are.
Okay, so then the videos are submitted during the adjudication process, or they will be?
Yes, that's part of our progressive collection of evidence.
And this is Ashley Becknell. I just want to jump in and say another helpful piece of information for us is if you have a listing ID, to give that to us, because we can report that directly to the platforms if there is something facially wrong with the listing for a very quick delisting rather than just adjudication.
So Ashley and Ms. Jackson, when on the website you said that people can go make complaints at the strnola.com, what is it, something like that? Right.
str@nola.gov.
Right, str@nola.gov. Do you have to make a complaint? These items are helpful, and you list that out so that people know, hey, a video is helpful. List the item number,
No, and I think 311 does ask for additional information about the complaint, but as far as specifically, asking for video, no.
Andrew, let's ask 311, let's send them a letter detailing the questions that 311 operators are asking. Okay. Okay, so for the purposes of the adjudication hearing, which we're waiting on for October 21st, do you obtain the police reports when neighbors report things like gunshots, such as, I know Councilmember Banks has a house that had gunshots. We also have one at 3301 Burgundy, at Piety, or at 250 Barrett Street. Do y'all get the police reports that there have been reports of gunfire so that you can present them at the adjudication hearings?
Yes, that's also part of the progressive collection of evidence in our NOPD.
Okay. So on October 21st, I guess Councilmember Banks and myself will be interested to make sure that those police reports are part of those addresses. Another issue we see with our constituents is they feel that they should not have to police their own neighborhoods, and that the city should be more proactive in its enforcement efforts. do you have a system in place where inspectors are actively looking for illegal STRs?
As far as proactive, like inspectors in general, when they're going out on other calls, if they see something, there is nothing, we don't say just go out on this specific complaint. If they see something that they believe to be illegal, whether STR, zoning, code enforcement, they bring the information back.
Okay. And then is there a way that we can better publicize license revocation and delisting efforts so that the public, so that after the public is sent in a complaint, they can see whether or not something was done? Kind of like, or like with these issues updated on One Stop? Because I think it would make, you know, when you send an inspector out to look at a property, I think it would make the public feel good that they know that there's been action on the issues. And how could we let folks know that?
Well, One Stop does give you the next step in the process. So if you've called and there has been an inspection, you will see that there's.
We don't want people to have to call into One Stop, right? Because that's a pain.
No, and not calling in.
Pull it up.
I'm saying when you call in a complaint, I'm talking about after they've called in the complaint. If they want to check One Stop, they can check One Stop to see whether or not it actually, there was an inspection, because One Stop will show the inspection and if in violations are found.
Okay, so they would need to look up on One Stop the address of the
Yes.
property to see if so it'll show whether or not an inspector has been there.
Yes.
Okay.
And it shows the number of violations as well.
Okay. And how often are these issues updated on One Stop? Are they, you have 24 hours to update them after the inspector has gone out, or what?
Generally, after the inspector, when the inspector has put it in, I believe it's real time when the inspector has put it in. So if you called and the inspector went out 5 days after, whenever the inspector has put in the information, I believe it is real time.
You know, this has kind of been my issue, and this is not your issue, Ms. Jackson, trust me. With One Stop, is that wouldn't it be great if there was an automatic update sent to the complainant that we followed up on it? I wonder if we can do that to the system. I have the same issue if, like if I file a building permit, right? And the inspectors are missing one piece of information, but meanwhile, I don't hear anything forever and I'm not notified. I have to go out and notify them and say, hey, what's taking so long? And then they're like, oh, well, we're waiting on this piece of information. I'm like, oh, well, wouldn't it have been great if I got that information beforehand? You know what I'm saying? Like if there's a way that we could have a notification system, I think would make everybody, people just want communication, you know,
Right.
and people, I think people have been really they understand these challenging times that we've been in, but if there was a way that we could notify folks that have made complaints on these things, it would make everyone know that things are happening, right?
Right. We agree. And I can, one of the things we are actually working on in the department is kind of like a new and improved system of notification.
Right.
Yeah, an evolution of communication, to be honest. So you'll see it in budget.
Great. I'm a big fan of that. We need to be more user friendly. And
I
then
agree.
while we were, and that's not on you, Ms. Jackson, I know neither of us are the architects of this whole system. We're just trying to make it, you know, a little bit better what we have. You know, while we were putting together the legislation, one thing that we consistently heard was the need for dedicated staff for enforcement. And the council approved 2 attorneys for this well in advance of the hiring freeze. What happened to those 2 positions?
I do know that one was filled, and we're working on the other. One is filled and we're working on the other.
Okay, so one attorney has been filled and they are working in specifically on STR issues.
They are working on SCR issues, yes.
Okay. And then the other one is vacant.
Yes.
Okay, do we know why? Because we approved this almost a year ago.
No, and it's something I've been informed of, that it, was dedicated staff for this. But like I said, the only information I have right now is that, one has been filled. So we do have a person that is working on the short-term rental enforcement that is law department staff. And the other is vacant at this time. And so we're
Okay,
working.
so this speaks to Councilmember Moreno's, if she's still on, she's been very aggressive on, when we had these conversations, we're doing legislation, everybody's been very concerned that here we are, we have money that has been allocated and set aside for enforcement purposes. And should there be there she is, should there be a designated STR office? Because we want to make sure that the resources that Council Moreno got set aside up in Baton Rouge was drawn down and actually used for this, and it doesn't affect the general fund and the bottom line. And I would just like to know why, because I was like, oh no, we don't need a separate office because everybody's at one-stop shop and we want to make sure it's coordinated. But now I'm beginning to rethink this if we don't even know, if we're not even filling the resources that we have from the funding sources that we have. I don't know if Councilman Moreno, you want to weigh in on this, because you're more well versed about that fund that y'all created up in Baton Rouge.
Well, the reason why we had been talking about creating just this one office for STR enforcement is because it's to your point, Councilmember Palmer, it's an easier way to track the money that's coming from Baton Rouge, because that money specifically supposed to go toward STR enforcement. I've also been having conversations with Councilmember Jeruso, who's also interested in trying to figure out where are we in really examining the possibility of creating this office for STR enforcement within the city, because I know that we had conversations, gosh, I don't even know, probably more than a year ago now, about having the CAO's office really begin to look into this matter and trying to figure out whether it was feasible to make this happen. And I'm not sure if we've received additional information as to where that process is at now. And I know we've had a lot of different things happen, obviously from the cyber attack to now COVID to everything else, but we can't let this issue just slide. And I really do believe that we have many people throughout this city thinking that nothing is being done when it comes to STR enforcement. And I mean, I hate to say it, but just from what I'm hearing today, I don't blame them for thinking that. I mean, if we really haven't done anything as far as trying to shut down any of these places, since the cyber attack, I hate to say it, but these neighbors are right. So it's time to really start beefing things up, and maybe creating this office of just dealing with STR enforcement could be the correct path to move in. But Councilmember Jeruso, you and I, like I said, have been having conversations about this, so I don't know if you would like to weigh in as well. Yeah, I mean, I think two things. One is echo the points that have already been made, which is we have dedicated money for this. The whole purpose to do it is for what we're doing. And the second thing is, I think we revamped and revised as a group all of these STR rules with the notion of not only are we revising, but then enforcement is going to be the piece that ensures things are being done correctly. And we can't really serve the public very well if we're saying we're going to do it, but we're not supplying the resources to do it. And that means in this case, not the money, but the personnel. And so I think we're all on the same wavelength that there have been setbacks with COVID, with cyber attack, with everything else. But as we're emerging from all of that, having dedicated resources, dedicated personnel, frontward facing, responsive, and being able to show in real time how this is happening, I think is crucial to the communication effort the chair mentioned at the very beginning, but also proving to the public that what we passed has teeth and is being implemented too.
Right. And then I just also want everybody to be clear is like that money is set aside for this and can't be reallocated and used for anything else. So it's not like we don't have the money for this and it can't be used and reappropriated somewhere else. It just can't be by law.
And if it is, we could lose that money.
So, okay. Real quick, thank you. And then I just got an email from a constituent and it's a really good question. It's about complaints. Can you clarify if we should be complaining about STRs every single day they have a guest, even if it's the same guest? So if there's a 5-day bachelor party and there's a complaint, Should it be every single day? So that it can then be registered as separate incidences?
No, I don't think that's necessary because we're going to monitor it and follow up with our inspection, right? And it's the number of times not the complaint, it's the number of times we have the evidence to proceed with the case.
All right. Okay, well, I think we're going to want some more information here in the council, the data that we requested in terms of the number of complaints, the frequency of them, whether or not we can use the executive orders from the mayor in terms of immediate shutdowns, just like we do with bars now that are not in compliance for COVID. I think we should be doing the same thing for these house parties. And again, I want clarity on why who that attorney position is, how their hours are tracked for STR enforcement. And I would also like to know why the other attorney has not been hired for the STR. And I think Councilmember Banks would like to weigh in.
It's just one other question, and it goes back on what you just talked about. Tammy, is it possible, or can we determine or make it mandatory that every day that there's a violation, that is a separate violation? If somebody has a 5-day rental, that should not count as one violation. Every day that they have somebody in there and they aren't supposed to, that should be a separate violation. If you run a red light 5 times, you don't get 1 ticket. You get a ticket every time you run the red light. So how do we get that codified? Or do we need to put that into an ordinance to make the violations day specific? Can we do that?
I agree with Councilmember Banks on that. I think it should not be one violation. I think it should be every single day is a violation.
And I don't know if the way to do it is to do it in an ordinance. I'm just asking again. I mean, whatever we need to do to give this thing some teeth, we need to do. But if you got a 5-day rental, that ought to be 5 different violations.
All right.
I hear you loud and clear.
And I just also want to be clear too, this council, most of us were elected based on reforming the STRs and improving the quality of life of our communities. We then spent well over a year doing this. It was a very long, arduous process, crafting this legislation, putting it together, so many community input meetings from all over the city. And now the ball's in your court. I mean, the administration's court, right? And that's really the way that our system of government is set up. We make the laws, y'all enforce them. And the breakdown happens when the really good, thoughtful laws that we passed as a body are not being enforced. It's creating, a lot of angst amongst all of us. So Tammy, I do appreciate your work, and thank you for your time. And oh wait, we do have a public comment. He's rushing back. Anybody else on the council have a comment before we hit public comment on this? All right. Andrew, we're ready when you're ready.
Okay. This public comment is from Chad Pellerin, not a paid representative. I am commenting on proposed changes that may come to this committee regarding ordinances proposed by Councilperson Williams on changes to the criminal misdemeanors from state to city misdemeanors. I live in the French Quarter and find the city does not enforce any of the ordinances that assist residents. Given that the police department is being requested to only enforce misdemeanor offenses when they have been many occasions in my residence that require discretion by the police to make a custodial arrest to prevent more violent crimes, as well as so-called nuisance violations, it is important for the police to have the discretion to use the appropriate penalty provisions given by state misdemeanor and felony provisions, depending upon their qualified judgment of the situation. Having penalties watered down in the French Quarter area where large drinking crowds become sometimes belligerent and disregard the rights of others' property, it only seems appropriate to retain the police power to effect removal of persons within the congested area. Thanks. Chad Pellerin, retired attorney, former Louisiana Attorney General, Assistant Attorney General.
Is that it, Andrew?
That's it.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, we're going to the final, Councilmember Jeruso. I know you requested that we put this item on the agenda, the update on the West End Development Project. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yes. I don't know if there's anybody else from the administration on this, but Last I've been told, the survey has been put out for bid. The question now just is when it will begin. So I'm hoping to get an update on that, and we'll circle back with Economic Development Office on getting that answer. But it's about keeping it on track and making sure the public knows that it continues to be in process, and hopefully we'll actually like break some ground sometime soon on this.
Well, let me know what we can do. I don't know, as a body. I'm sorry, I think we were anticipating somebody else speaking for STRs that was more aware of this issue. But, you know, we sit here and we talk so much about economic development. But, you know, these projects that are fully funded, that should have been built, I mean, this should have been built years ago. It's had money and been funded since Katrina. We're 15 years out. And it's absolutely an economic development project, and it's fully funded. So I'm with you, and I know we inherited this from the previous administration. But I would like to get an update on that as well. So
Thank you for adding to the agenda. I appreciate it.
thank you, Councilor Drew. So with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Druso. I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Great. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.